The No They Can't on the cover of my book is a play off of the last election campaign where there was all that excitement about the magic politician who said, yes, we can. And the intensity of that was extraordinary. And frankly, it's all great if we means free people, but we in their minds, and in many people's minds, has come to mean the state. And this is really a bad idea. But as I've come to learn, it's intuitive that maybe you understand life doesn't work that way, but to most people, I mean, there's all this polling information. People don't trust government. Congress has a 12% approval rating. That may be true, but the next time the crisis happened, people's instinctive reaction is that government's got to do something. I mean, think about after September 11th. We have to take over airport security. Tom Daschle said you can't professionalize if you don't federalize. It was instinctive. People were scared. The screeners had let these people go through. In fact, they had obeyed all the FAA rules. The small knives they brought on and the box cutters were legal. The unlocked cockpit doors, that was all legal. But nevertheless, they were minimum wage workers often and private profit-seeking contractors. People viewed that as a risk. And so now we get the TSA. And how's that working out for us? So you know your experience with it. I didn't realize the extent of it. It goes well beyond that. How much more do they spend than the private screeners? Not twice as much, 10 times as much they now spend. And in the law, they put in a part that said, if your city wants to opt out and go back to the system that Israel uses and Europe uses and most of the world uses, which is private contractors competing under government supervision, which of course is better because they have to compete, and you can fire them if they're bad. You can't fire the government. It creates some flexibility. If you want to do that, just ask the TSA, and you can. And a couple places have. Kansas City, the largest is San Francisco. So we go to San Francisco to shoot, and we interview people, and they say things like, gee, these screeners are nicer, and the line moves more quickly. And TSA undercover studies have found that they are much more likely to catch contraband in San Francisco than the government screeners are. And why is that? Do we look into it? Well, it's a private contractor who knows he has to work hard to keep the job, and he does all kinds of innovative experiments. They run contests where the best screener can win $2,000. Who can find the contraband fastest? Who can pack the bag most quickly? They then, to keep the airports happy so they get hired next year, they shift screeners around so the line keeps moving. So all these other airports want to get these private screeners, which is legal under the law, and they apply for permission to the TSA. The TSA ignores them for a year, doesn't even respond. And finally, a few months ago, they say, we don't think this would be advantageous to the federal government. That's the new standard. Not how can we move people along, how can we keep people safe, what's advantageous to us. The bureaucracy has built an empire, and its goal is to keep itself going. This is what happened. This is not intuitive when people shout, yes, we can. Now, I've learned this the hard way. I was a consumer reporter on the left, cheering on government regulation. I became a libertarian when I finally saw it did not work. You were smarter about this than I, but it's not intuitive. We really have to work hard to explain this to people. We're not wired to understand that a free society can solve complex economic problems. We grew up in a family. We're programmed to believe that mommy and daddy know best and should plan for us. Our ancestors grew up in tribes where if you didn't obey the tribal leader and harvest the fruit at the right time, you died and you didn't give birth to us. We're programmed to follow the leader. The mechanism where Adam Smith showed us how the invisible hand could do this better just doesn't, maybe it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to most Americans. I do these pieces which try to explain it to people, and Andrea Rich, who's sitting over here, runs a charity that gives them to high school students so we can at least introduce these ideas. And I hope you will support her or give her your card. But it's an uphill climb. And I see this again and again. I mean, one example of the success of private markets is in South America. I mean, of the basket case that is Central and South America, one country is doing quite well. That's Chile. And the biggest reason is because this guy named Jose Piñera, the finance minister, created private Social Security accounts. So instead of trusting the government to give you money, everybody has a little savings book, and they can watch the money appreciate it. It makes them think about their own money and investment. And through this simple innovation, Chile has prospered. And I give President Bush credit. He wasn't the best speaker, but he went to most every state trying to sell that in America and got nowhere because people here are horrified by the idea. So I go to Chile and expect to find people who will say, hey, this is great. But everybody I interview, nobody says that. Everybody says, oh, you know, the bank that administers this, the fee is too high, and government ought to step in and reduce income inequality. Nobody understood the mechanism that had made their lives better. I mean, this is also true in Hong Kong. Milton Friedman's famous example of the most popular high school video that Andrea gives out is one that says, is America number one? I ask students, why is America prosperous? And they think for a while, and they think, oh, it's because we're a democracy. And I say, well, India's a democracy, and India's poor. Well, India's overpopulated. Actually, the population density of India is the same as that of New Jersey, which is doing okay. They say, well, America has natural resources, but so does India. And we can say, well, what about Hong Kong? It doesn't have democracy. It doesn't have natural resources, yet it got rich. They went from third world to first world in just 50 years. They're as rich as we are. Why is that? They don't know, but of course it's because of economic liberty. And now we have these Heritage and Freedom House polls that compare countries by economic freedom, and the places that are free are the best places to live. But this is not intuitive. And when I went to Hong Kong, I tried to open a business in New York. It took me months. In Hong Kong, I could open one in one day. And that's why they're prosperous. But when I asked people, they didn't know. They made the same comments the people in Chile made. Oh, yeah, the government should step in and fix this problem and fix that problem. Capitalism performs miracles all the time, leaving people alone. I mean, we've lifted more people out of the mud and misery of poverty through markets in the third world than ever before. Nobody in America notices. People here say, why isn't education free? The Occupy Wall Street protest down there, they want more. We take it for granted that supermarkets have 30,000 products, and they rarely poison anybody, and all the products are cheap. We take it for granted that I can go to a foreign country, stick a piece of plastic in the wall, and cash will come out. And I can give that same piece of plastic to a total stranger, and he'll rent me a car for a week. And when I get home, Visa or MasterCard will have the accounting correct to the penny. The government, by contrast, can't even count the votes accurately. And yet, Obama was elected partly on the message, we're going to fix health care. I mean, Obamacare, by the time it passed, may not have been popular, but most people in the country wanted the government to do something about health care. And health care really isn't a free market even before Obamacare. It's already been messed up by all the government steps that encourage people to buy insurance that somebody else pays. But the results are already out there, and they're already awful. A couple of years ago, the Detroit Medical Center announced proudly that it was using barcodes to use computers to electronically keep track of all its patients and all their medical records and the drugs they took. And yay, isn't this great? But think about it. Supermarkets did that 40 years ago. I mean, Coke and Pepsi is obviously less important than our medical records. But it took 40 years of insanity before we brought this to the system where insurance companies and government is pulling the strings. Friedrich Hayek said, the curious task of economics is to teach man how little he understands about what he thinks he can design. That's what I hope to do with No, They Can't. It's a big battle. I thank you for fighting it. Clearly, leaving people free is what makes us prosperous. And economists tend to focus on the prosperous part of that statement. That's not the most important one. The free part is. It sounds vague, but it's just as important because individuals and their freedom matter. It's a moral objection to big government to say it leaves us less free, because if control over our own lives is diminished, if we can't tell the mob or even our neighbors to leave us alone, we are not just less free, we are less. Big government makes us all smaller.